Let's jump right in. What if, instead of the government watching our every move, we completely flipped the script? Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating thought experiment from a piece called The Reverse Surveillance Paradox and the Control of the Elite. This explainer is basically a roadmap for auditing the global elite by actually enforcing the will of the majority. And let me tell you, it takes an incredibly optimistic, inspiring, and, fair warning, heavily sarcastic look at what true social justice could actually look like.
So think about this modern absurdity for a second. We're constantly told that all these new super invasive surveillance measures, scanning our private messages, tracking where we go, we're told they're absolutely vital to stop crime. The whole broader net means fewer crimes pitch. But seriously, why on earth is the system aggressively checking the group chats of average, mathematically broke folks to prevent highly expensive, elite-level global crimes? It just doesn't add up.
I mean, look at the stark contrast here between the 99% and the 1%. On one hand, you've got the average citizen, heavily monitored, but with literally zero budget to run some global crime syndicate. And on the other, the global elite. Just a few million people who actually own the economy, the infrastructure, the whole shebang. They get complete privacy, yet they're the only ones with the structural wealth to actually cause systemic harm. The sheer irony is that the people who have the means to commit global crimes are the exact same people operating the cameras. And here's the core paradox. Crime is incredibly expensive. We're not talking about petty theft. Running massive criminal enterprises, think market manipulation, institutional corruption, high-end trafficking, that requires serious, untraceable wealth. You need a massive liquid budget to buy high-quality illicit goods, hire professional security, and bribe officials. The average person just flat out does not have the financial capacity to play that game. Yet, the current system watches us with the exact same intensity as those who actually can.
Which leads to this wildly sarcastic but honestly inspiring pivot. What if we just flipped the camera? What would actually happen if we stopped watching these structurally incapable masses and focused purely on the elite? The system already knows our credit ratings, our purchasing power, our entire financial background, so why not use all that data to exclusively monitor the only people who can actually afford to be global supervillains?
This radical paradigm shift is what the source text calls reverse surveillance. And what's really cool is that it doesn't frame this as some dark dystopia. Not at all. It presents it as a totally logical, socially just reallocation of security resources. It's a proportional system. It intentionally excludes the general public from being monitored, simply because we lack the capacity for systemic crime. Instead, it exclusively tracks those with the concentrated wealth and power to actually break society.
Now, how would this work? The text lays out a very practical, multi-band framework to audit the elite based on value thresholds. And don't worry about exact monetary amounts here. It's the conceptual boundaries that matter. There are two main tiers. First, you have the entry-level elite. Their wealth crosses the threshold of being able to fund severe, untraceable crime. Then you have the structural VIPs, folks with such vast wealth they can manipulate markets and politics. Basically, crossing these conceptual wealth lines mathematically unlocks exclusive VIP monitoring.
So what are the perks of hitting that first conceptual threshold? Well, once you're in the entry-level elite, your wealth is sufficient to do some pretty untraceable stuff. Therefore, you receive a mandatory basic microchip implant. Congratulations! After all, these are highly useful, economy-building members of society, right? But precisely because they are so capable, just one bad decision from them could cost society dearly. So, this baseline monitoring is just a simple, optimistic matter of public safety.
But what if your wealth goes way beyond that? Welcome to Tier 2, the structural VIPs. At this level, your wealth makes you capable of serious institutional corruption and political pressure. So you get an upgrade. You go from a mere chip to a permanent, unremovable golden necklace with a built-in microphone. The original Hungarian text perfectly calls this stepping out of the anonymous crowd. It's really not a punishment. Think of it as a shiny badge of honor that ensures total, systemic accountability for the people pulling the strings.
And hey, to make sure the elite don't feel too alienated, the system thoughtfully offers customization options. You can hide the microphone in a religious cross, so you always feel watched by your chosen higher power. Not religious? No problem. You can hide it in a zodiac sign, a dolphin, or even a family crest. It's just a delightfully sarcastic take on turning state surveillance into a luxury accessory.
But what happens when these folks retire? Yeah, there's a strict protocol for that too. When an elite member steps down from active duty, the flashy golden necklace comes off. However, the basic microchip, that stays in forever. Why? Because they're elite networks, their insider knowledge, their deep connections, all of that remains highly dangerous and relevant for the rest of their lives.
Now, it's absolutely crucial to point out that this initiative isn't exclusively about bank accounts. Surveillance has to be based on positions of power, too. We're talking politicians, bureaucrats, officials in environmental, security, economic, and legislative roles. In these cases, the logic just flips. It's not their personal wealth that warrants the monitoring, but the immense potential for systemic harm that their job title allows. Bottom line, if you have the power to alter the lives of millions, you earn the microphone.
This whole concept is firmly rooted in a fundamental principle of social justice, the democratic mandate. Since the unmonitored majority makes up roughly 99% of the population, we have the legitimate democratic right to enforce our will and demand the auditing of the tiny 1% holding the actual power. It's brilliant because it takes the exact justification governments use right now, for the greater good, and applies it mathematically to where the real danger actually is.
To be totally clear, this reverse surveillance initiative is not about petty revenge against the rich. It's about logical transparency. By establishing true proportionality, where the level of surveillance actually matches someone's capacity for harm, we finally give the majority a genuine sense of security. It's really the only way to secure societal peace and ensure long-term, stable prosperity for everybody, not just the guys at the very top.
But, of course, actually achieving this requires action. The text calls for a massive, cross-cultural movement, a global wave of protests demanding an urgent referendum. And we're not talking about just holding a few signs on a weekend. It's about enforcing the majority will and demanding a strict, itemized accounting. A total audit to find out exactly who knew what, when they knew it, and why they kept it hidden from the public.
Now, beneath all the heavy sarcasm, there is a very serious warning here. The elite's current obsession with monitoring everyday citizens might not be some misguided attempt to protect us. It might actually be preparation for massive, engineered global crises. Because in a severe crisis, the ability for the public to ask questions or demand transparency becomes a dangerous luxury, one that the current surveillance apparatus will be ready to quickly shut down.
History offers us a pretty chilling lesson on this. As the source text points out, before every great reset, the actors of the old system erase their tracks. It's true. The powerful always try to hide their sins, their financial maneuvers, and their systemic failures right before the deck gets reshuffled. If the majority doesn't demand this audit right now, those tracks will absolutely be erased in the confusion of whatever global emergency comes next.
So, what does this all mean? Well, the question isn't really whether we need an audit of the global elite. Basic logic and social justice demand that we do. The real question is this: will the 99% wake up and enforce their democratic will before the tracks are erased entirely? Will we run out of time? It's definitely a fascinating, provocative perspective on power, privacy, and who actually needs to be watched.